Welcome back to the second lecture in this week. I want us to begin by taking a look at the content of our own interior world for a moment. I want us to understand something of the self-centered mess that gets in the way of providing effective pastoral counseling. I want you to think for a moment. You're sitting across from somebody who says to you, I really feel like I'm on thin edge. What do you do? Do you probe? What does pastoral counseling look like at that moment? Perhaps you might ask an open-ended question. You might say something like, well, what's going on? You say you're on the thin edge. Tell me what is happening in your life. If you want to discuss it more, I would love to listen to you. Now, suppose that person said in response to that, I really don't know what's going on. All I know is that I break down and cry at least a couple of times a day. I just feel so tired and defeated. Now, does that sound just like a scream at you in terms of, I want to ask a question, I want to know what to do? Could not somebody who is going to teach me how to do pastoral counseling tell me what to do at this point? What do I do? What do I do as the counselor? It's an opportunity for pastoral counseling for sure. But you have heard me suggest so far in this course that you must not begin with the question of, what do I do? The question you must begin with is, what is going on inside of me? All of us have suggested, as I've suggested, are deeply self-centered, and the passion for self-centeredness rules within each of us. And most of us, in our interactions with people, that's present there. A child, it's very obvious if you look at a child. A child will say, I don't want my vegetables. Give me the dessert. I want it now, now, now. We say, well, that's just being self-centered. You have to live by higher rules than just your own desires. And in a child, that might be obvious. And in us, it is a little less obvious sometimes. To a hurting friend, we might say things like, it sounds really tough, but I want you to know that I believe in you. Maybe as we are saying that, in our voice is soft, we cannot hear our own souls and our own interior worlds. We are saying something like, there, I think I did the right thing. Did I measure up to the standards of being the effective pastoral counselor? I think I proved myself to be adequate when I asked that question, when I gave that encouragement. What's the ruling passion? That is an illustration of self-centeredness. As I have indicated before, how often has a husband seen his wife crying and comes over to her and holds her and asks, honey, what's wrong? I want to be here for you. But to himself, he says, I hope that was a good thing to do. It really seems to me that I've done a good job here tonight. So the next time I'm hurting, I'm going to expect something from her. There's a self-centeredness in that, right? A tit for tat. I help you when you're hurting, and I want something from you when I'm hurting. A lot of self-centeredness, it underlies a lot of what we do. So often in our attempts to provide pastoral counseling, the passions that control us are not the passions of the Spirit of Christ. They are the passions of self-centeredness. And I want to spend our time putting content to that. I want to suggest to you that the most natural energy in each of our souls is self-centeredness. When someone shares a concern with us, the very first thing we need to do is to pay attention to our own natural inclination to think of ourselves. I'm really naturally more concerned about me than I am about you. Even when your life is falling apart, the hard thing to say is, it's a hard thing to say, isn't it? To say, I am really concerned about myself more than you. It's a hard thing to see that it's true. But it is true. It really is. Here are a couple of illustrations to make the point, and then let me put a couple of conceptual contents to the idea. My wife and I've been married for quite some time now, and during the time that we fell in love, our courtship. What does that mean? I wonder what that means. We stood before the preacher one day and we said all the right words, and we followed the directions of the pastor who married us. And I said things like, I promise to love you and honor you and cherish you and until death do us part. But suppose you could have seen beneath the waterline into the passions that were ruling my heart at the point of marrying my wife so long ago. I think what you would have seen, had you had a special magnifying glass and you could look in and see, maybe you would see something like, I think you would have heard something like this. I really had not felt very good about myself in a lot of ways. I really don't feel very good about myself. I'm not sure really who I am, but you are a pretty girl, and you're intelligent and you're fun and you're bright. And I really think you're attractive. You're everything I want in a girl. You seem to like me, and I like the way that you make me feel, and therefore my commitment to you is to marry you, to give you the chance to keep on making me feel about me the way I want to feel about me. Do we have our terms clear? I think if you would have had your special soul magnifying glass, you might have seen that that was something that might have been alive within the center of my soul. On the other hand, my wife may have been saying something similar. My wife, and of course, I say this only um, with permission. She has been the victim of sexual abuse in her past. And when she stood before the preacher to marry me, I believe what she may have been saying was, I have been enjoyed in such an intelligent way that I made didn't make me didn't make me feel good. I've been enjoyed in an illegitimate way, made me feel cheap and dangerous. But Dan, after my time with you, I've come to believe that maybe you value me at the level deeply of my soul, that you see something of the beauty that's within me. Maybe you're going to cherish me and treat me well with a level of dignity and care and concern, all the way I like the way you make me feel too. And that must mean that I love you, and so I'm going to marry you. And let me explain the terms. I'm marrying you so that you can treat me the way that I want to be treated, so I can begin to feel the way I long to feel, which is so different than the way I feel in the middle of my sexual abuse so long ago, and many other circumstances in my life. And Dan, those are the terms. Now, if you take a moment and look at those two things that were alive inside of me and inside of her, can you see the obvious self-centeredness that underlines even the very beginning of a good marriage with two people who really do truly love each other? Can you see that the relationship is really not dissimilar from a relationship between a tick and a dog? What is a tick there for? Is it there to bless the dog? Or is a tick experiencing its own emptiness and looking for nourishment, something in the host to sink its teeth into, whatever it has, into the host flesh, and suck out what would bring fullness to the tick? You see, I believe that most relationships, marriage included, and even a parent-child relationship, pastoral counseling relationships, the fundamental dynamic is often what is going on is no different than the tick and the dog metaphor. Of course, the problem with most marriages is that there are two ticks and no dog. And that presents a few problems, doesn't it? In all of our relationships, the self-centeredness is what really gets in the way. What happens in parenting, we have two sons and one daughter, and we're very proud of everybody here, but God has blessed these children in many ways, and so we're excited about that. But I will tell you, not much thanks are given to me, maybe no thanks to me at all, but maybe it's all of God. When our kids were extremely little, I wanted to have our kids, be godly. And so I wanted to teach them things about God. And so I decided that I was going to mature them at a young age. And I did this to my daughter. I read her the Bible every once in a while and quiz her about things. And, I had a friend who did something like that too. And, he literally purchased an overhead projector and made his kids sit in front of it and gave them Old and New Testament classes. I didn't quite do that, but I certainly did give a lot of quizzing to my daughter. What's the energy going on inside of me as I'm laboring so hard to make my daughter godly and make my kids godly? Is that a love for God? Is it wanting to bring praise to the glory of his name? Is that what I'm after? Or am I saying, I know how I will feel if my kids rebel. I know how I will feel if my kids do well. And I want my kids to respond in wonderful ways. I'm going to work really hard at it. It is possible that even what appears to be our best intended behaviors at times, whether it's as husbands or wives or parents with their children or friends or with people whom you're providing pastoral counseling to, it's possible that there is really something going on in the core of us that interferes with the process of relationship, that interferes with pastoral counseling. What is fundamentally the disease, the poison of self-centeredness? What I want you to think about that with you, I want to put some conceptual framework around the self-centeredness. And the reason I want to do this is because I want us to understand self-centeredness clearly enough for us to be able to recognize it in ourselves to the point where we are disgusted by it, to the point where we see it being so pervasive and so strong that we are helpless in its presence, and that all we can do before it is stand broken and in the presence of a holy God and trust that his redeeming grace to not punish us with the punishment that we deserve is good for us. Maybe in our brokenness before God over how self-centered we are, maybe that is the process through which the love of Christ begins to bubble up in our hearts and come out in our pastoral counseling, and we begin to provide the kind of relationship in pastoral counseling that it really does indeed require. Well, let us look at self-centeredness this way. In order to understand the profound disease of self-centeredness within every human soul, we need to understand two theological concepts, two very basic truths that the Bible teaches. And the first, we need to understand something of what it means when the Bible says that we bear the image of God. I am created in the image of God, and you are created in the image of God. Now, whatever else that very rich and deep theological concept means, it means at least this, that you and I, in some way, resemble God. Now, let us keep that in our minds. We bear the image of God, and in some way, we resemble God. Something has happened. This is the second theological truth that we have to grasp, that we are fallen beings. The first one is we bear God's image, but number two, something has happened. It happened way back, the garden. It has been affecting us ever since. Every single person who has ever been born except Jesus has been affected by this disease. We could say infected. And now it's the center of our image-bearing souls. We have to understand that. If we are going to come to grips with what is self-centeredness really all about, then we're going to need to understand that the profound issues of self-centeredness emerge from understanding these two theological truths. One, we bear God's image. Again, whatever that means, it means that we resemble God in some way. How do we look like God? Does God have a body that looks like ours with 5 fingers on this hand and 5 fingers on that hand and a nose and a couple of ears? How do we resemble God? Well, let me tell you a couple of things that most theologians would agree, that at least in part of the center of our resemblance to God is that you and I we're built with the capacity to relate. Just as God, in whose image we were created, is a relational God, we are created with the ability, the capacity to relate. Recall, as I said earlier, that perhaps the cornerstone doctrine of the entire Christian religion is the doctrine of the Trinity. God is a relational God. He exists in community eternally, and you and I have been built, we have been designed with the capacity to enter into relationships that are like the relationship that God has forever enjoyed within his own community of the three persons of the Godhead. And to say, as simple as I can, I would put it this way: to bear his image means that you and I have the capacity to enjoy good relating. We have the capacity to enjoy good relating. To elaborate that with just one simple addition, we have the twin capacity to relate, to receive love. As the Son received love from the Father was loved by the Son. We have the twin capacity to receive love, and we have the capacity to give love. Look at that. We can receive it, and we can give it. Now, because you and I have the capacity for love, capacity to receive love, that follows every natural and necessarily is this, what follows from it is this, that whenever we are in a situation where we are not receiving love, whenever we are in a situation where we do not feel love coming towards us, where we do not feel the acceptance and enjoyment and the celebration of who we are by somebody else, whenever the love is not coming towards us, we become aware not of our capacity to enjoy love, rather we become aware of our desperate longing to receive love. What is a capacity becomes a longing when the capacity is not filled. How many of you would say that every moment of your life you are just deeply aware of being loved by your spouse, your parents, your kids, your friends, your pastor? How many of you would say that every moment there is a love just flowing into you that feels so wonderful? Or how many of you would say far more spiritually that you are aware of God's love for you at every single moment? When the diagnosis comes back and the doctor says cancer, something in you bursts out. I know how deeply God loves me. Is that what bursts from you? Is that where you are? That's not where a friend of mine was when he was diagnosed with cancer. That's not where I was when I fell from a ladder and had to have plate and 9 screws put in my wrist. How many of you were aware of how deeply God loves you when something happens in your family that breaks your heart, or one of your children goes in a very, very bad direction, or you've worked so hard to be the right kind of parent, immediately you say, my longing for love is so deeply satisfied in that moment. Are you thoroughly enjoying the fact that God is deeply loving you in that moment? Our health as persons, the health of our souls depends on whether we first receive love, because we are dependent beings. We must be loved by someone outside of ourselves. There's a dependency that we have. And then our health depends just as much on whether we give away the love that we receive, because that is what the Trinity does, doesn't it? They receive love for one another, and they simultaneously give love to one another. And it's so intense, so full. There's an interdependency relationship of fully loving people, radically other-centered, and so much so that they are one being who receive the love that they so much enjoy from one another. If we are in a personal relationship with God, if you are a Christian, and I hope you are if you are in this course, and if I am a Christian, and I am, then it does mean that we are ongoingly receiving the unconditional love that we were designed to enjoy. So that means it is at my core. Even as I stand before you right now, whatever else is happening in my life, you do not know what's happening in my life. I have not told you what's going on today or this week. You do not know how my wife is, or if we're getting along or not right now, or what my kids are doing. You do not know the friendships that I have and the things that are on my plate. You don't know much about me. But you do know this, that because I am in a relationship with God, that fundamentally at my core, I am not a needy person. Fundamentally at my core, because I have been given the love that my soul longs for in the relationship with God, I am not fundamentally needy. Now, I may not be aware of that, but it's present there. It's fundamentally at my core if I am a Christian. Now, how many Christians do you know who come across as actually quite needy? Why do they do that? Why is there a lack of awareness of the fact that God's love has touched their soul at the deepest level where satisfaction becomes a real reality? Why are we out of touch with that and so often experience ourselves as being quite very needy? Now, we bear the image of God. We long to be loved. We are in a relationship with God. Therefore, we are loved. Therefore, we can say that we are not needy persons. We are satisfied persons. Again, I'm talking theologically because we know that that's not our experience reality, is it? But why is it not our experience reality? Is it not what's happening inside of us much of the time? Well, it takes us to the second truth, that we are fallen people. Yes, we bear the image of God. That's truth number one. But number two, we are fallen people. Now, what does that mean if we are fallen people? I think that one of the great problems in the church today is that we understand sin in a very trivial, superficial fashion. With many audiences that I have preached before and spoken to, I have said, people, write down the last time that you've sinned. Don't take very long to think about it. Just write it down or bring it to mind. When's the last time you sinned? And people will look kind of confused and think, the last time I sinned? When was the last time I sinned? They write down something like, well, I went faster than I should have on the highway when I was speeding yesterday, so I guess that was breaking the government's rules. I guess that's a sin. What is our awareness of sin? What is our awareness of missing the mark and falling short of the glory of God? Is our awareness of sin only that which happens above the waterline? The things that we do visibly and transgress our own standards? Or do we have a deeper understanding of sin? What does it mean that we are sinners, that we are fallen people? Think about it this way. Even though we are bearers of God's image, even though we resemble God and we are designed with the capacity to relate, both to receive love and to give love, even though that is true, and even though we are people who have the privilege of bearing God's image in a way where we can move towards God in worship for the love that he has given us, and then take that love he has given us and move towards other people and give it to them, even though that's the design, and even though that is the way that we are built with the capacities that we have, something has happened. We are fallen people. What that fundamentally means is this: every one of us has turned away from God, as it says in Isaiah. Every one of us has turned away from God, and we have really told him essentially we are not interested in receiving the kind of love, Lord, that you provide. Recall that very disturbing passage in Jeremiah where God looks out at his people and he calls the heavens, the stars and the suns and the moons, and he says, come here, take a look at this. Here are my people who are thirsty. They long for what the water that I can give them. They long for the relationship that I can provide. Look at every one of them is doing, and they are walking right by the springs of living water. They're walking right by it, and yet they're turning away from me, and they are going over to other sources. They are digging, metaphorically, for themselves broken cisterns that really cannot provide them water for their souls at all. They are foolish people. Sin is absolute insanity. We are fallen people who take who we are as image bearers and turn away from God and say to someone else, you take care of me. Do you see that that is the deal that I had with my wife when I met her? I thought she was pretty, and I wanted to be with her, and I wanted to spend time with her. And we had a courtship, and I think that there was something inside of me that said I long to receive something that gives me a sense of my own deep value. And as she turned her gaze towards me and was interested in me, I felt this deep sense of worth, a deep sense that I was loved, that I was enjoyed, and I longed for that. God is my savior, and I will go to heaven, and I will worship him on Sundays. But what I really long for is something that God can't provide. I really want my wife. You're doing a good job at that, I tell her. Tell you what, let's get married. You can continue to do that. You see, that is a fallen image bearer who moves towards a woman out of the energy of self-centeredness. Wow. That's in me. That's also in you. Let me tell you a very, very tragic thing that happens when you and I turn from God, and all of us naturally do that. Our longing for love becomes a demand. No longer do we simply turn to God with a notion of, I long for love, and you have given it to me. I am a satisfied person who's whole. I am not empty person. I am not a ghost. I am a solid person. I am a live person who can give my substance to another. I can love my wife, and she then lets me down. I can love my husband, and he's not there for me because I'm not desperately demanding his love. I'm full. I have the love of God. When you turn from God, that longing to receive love turns into a demand. Now, the mood is, look, this longing is a need, and you jolly well better satisfy it, or I'm going to find someone better. We become absolutely ruled by that passion. And this is not extreme language. There is no hyperbole here. This is what really happens. If you take an honest look inside of your own soul, your own heart, we become absolutely, not partly, but absolutely ruled by the passion to get somebody to give us at least a little of what we need, don't we? Now, who's well aware of being all what we're thinking of? Well, ourselves. Whose well-being are we thinking of? My own, your own. And that's self-centeredness. I want somebody to give me what I deeply need. And these longings that could be satisfied in a relationship with God now become demands that I make of you, or you make of me, or we make of one another. And all you can relate to this, all of you can. You have been in relationships where there has been some level of rejection or some level of criticism, or someone has not enjoyed you, or you have been put down or demeaned, or you felt rejected, or you felt, I don't know, denied. You felt demeaned. You felt your dignity disrespected. What do you feel at that point? Why does that pain feel so intense? Because you were designed, right, to experience something very, very different from that pain that you are experiencing at that time. The real pain of not receiving love becomes something, well, listen very carefully, becomes something that is so deep and so bad and so hurtful that every one of us takes the position that whatever provides relief from that pain feels in the moment justified. Why does the man who has an affair rarely feel profoundly guilty, but feels somehow justified even though he knows that it is not the law of God? Why does the person who gets divorced say, I know this is wrong, it goes against God, but I just have to do it? But I know that God will forgive and he will understand, because there is a pain within. And the relieving or the removing of that pain seems to justify whatever means we take to find that relief. Folks, this is happening inside of me. It is happening inside of you. It is happening inside of the people whom that you will someday sit with and provide pastoral counseling for. And this is the dynamic. This is the reality. This is the passion. This is the self-centeredness that is going to get in the way of pastoral counseling. Fallen image bearers, we can say, then feel an inner neediness that drives them like a thirst of a person in the desert. We are ruled, therefore, we can say, very simply, by self-need. Now let us look at it this way. Let us go back to our familiar iceberg once again. Look down beneath the surface into my interior world below the waterline. And maybe the first thing that we are going to see is what I'm going to call self-need. As I come to you and provide pastoral counseling, I am fundamentally saying, yeah, I want to provide you pastoral counseling, but I, the counselor, I have needs. I want my needs to be met in this relationship of counselor to counselee. And if that's the fundamental thing you are saying, it's going to interfere with that relationship in counseling. It's going to interfere with the power that you might have to provide meaningful pastoral counseling. Self-need, the first reality, I have got to find somebody who is going to take care of me. Of course, the fact is that I do not trust anybody to take care of me. I have learned, as most people have, that absolute trust in anybody is suicide. Have any of you, even with the best parents in the world, experienced a parent who has been completely and fully and wonderfully sensitive to your every need? No, nobody has. There's no husband, there's no wife, there's no parent or child or friend or pastor who's ever done that. And so we learn that we have this self-need that nobody is going to do it for us. And therefore, I must do it. I must take responsibility to get my needs met. The second dynamic that we experience in the deepest part of our souls, therefore, is what I would call self-management. I am committed to taking care of myself. I have this need, self-need, I hurt, and I need to be loved and honored and valued and respected and so on and so forth. And so self-management comes along. I will find some way to get what I need, whether it is by depending upon my natural talents to impress other people, or a social style that is analytical or fun, whatever it is, I'm going to find some strategy in relating that is going to get you to give me something of what I need. Self-need is really a spirit of entitlement. It is what I need. Give it to me. You should give it to me. Then self-management comes along. It's a style of manipulation. You see, the Bible takes these two ideas of self-need and self-management and just calls it the flesh. And it's this driving energy in everybody's soul apart from God. So you want to provide pastoral counseling, and I want to provide counseling pastorally. And I want to sit down with a friend who tells me his daughter has had an abortion. I want to sit down with a friend who tells me his wife left him. And I want to sit down with a friend who's going through cancer and tell them, I would love to provide you pastoral counseling, but this energy inside of me, you see, I can't do it. But if I'm a Christian, what has happened at the point of my Christianity is, in the core of my soul, something else has been planted there. Now it is not just the energy of self-need and self-management, but now I have become aware that at the core of my soul, there is a thirst that only God himself can satisfy, can meet. And now, as a fallen, yet redeemed image bearer, my appetite for God is implanted within me. And I turn to him and I say, God, it is not my wife, it is not my husband, it is not my kids, it's not my friends. Somehow it is you. You are the one that I depend on. You are the one that I'm going to trust. You are the one that I am going to enjoy. You are the one that I am going to celebrate. You are everything. You are all that I need. There is a soul thirst at the core of my being, And the soul thirst, the more I relate to God, leads to a deep soul trust that says, God, you really are supplying me with everything I need. Folks, if you and I are going to become effective in counseling, pastoral counseling, then we are going to have to learn what it means to live out of the deepest part of our being. The thirst that is satisfied by God, the appetite for God that only He Himself can satisfy, and a trust in Him that says, even when you do not like me, even when you are hard on me, even when I fail you, I can still move towards you. And the passion of the Holy Spirit. We are now prepared to begin to think about what does it mean to enter into another person's life. We have talked about passion. We're going to begin to talking next week about wisdom. And everything that I have talked about just now, as I'm noticing that self-need and that self-management, and I'm noticing that, yes, that's present in me, but it's not very deep under the waterline. It's really quite close to the surface. And I can see it, and I can own it, and I can confess it within myself, and I can put it aside, and I become aware of how my needs are more deeply met in God than anywhere else, and I begin to rest in Him, me, the counselor. That's what sets me up to begin to move into the life of another with wisdom. We're going to talk about that in the lectures to come. So you enjoy this week. Homework, reading, and all of the quizzes. And I'll see you in the next week. Bye-bye.